Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander together into a time that feels almost like a dream, where the desert stretches endlessly, and yet, somehow, life not only survives, but thrives. You probably wouldn't survive this place if you just showed up unprepared. Sand in your shoes, sun in your eyes, no idea which way the river bends. But that's the beauty of history. You get to peek in without worrying about blisters. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, while you're at it, leave a comment down below telling me where you are and what time it is locally. I'm always curious how the world tunes into these journeys. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step lightly across the uneven desert floor, feeling the warmth of sun-baked sand against your shoes, the air shimmering like a mirage. There's a kind of stillness here that almost hums, a quiet that's louder than any city street. The Supe Valley sprawls before you, wide and silent, dotted with rounded hills and rocky outcrops. At first glance, it looks inhospitable, like nature forgot this corner of the world. But if you pay attention, you notice subtle signs of life. The glint of sun on distant water channels, the scattering of hardy shrubs, and the soft tracks of desert creatures moving between them. This is where it all begins, right here in the vast openness where humans first decided that sand was not an end, but a beginning. You pause to run a hand over a stone that has been warmed by the morning sun, imagining the hands of the earliest settlers brushing these same surfaces thousands of years ago. They must have looked around and thought, yes, it's harsh, yes, it's dry, but if we can understand it, we can live here. And that's exactly what they did. They watched the seasonal floodwaters of the river and learned its rhythms, noting when it would rise, when it would recede, how the soil shifted and changed color with each passing month. They didn't fight nature, they partnered with it, coaxing life from the sand with patience and careful observation.
As you walk closer to the river's edge, you can almost hear the whisper of history. Imagine the first green shoots of cotton sprouting, tiny and fragile, yet holding the promise of clothing, nets, and trade. Beans and squash twist their way up makeshift trellises. Sweet potatoes burrow into the fertile soil, and guava trees stretch their branches skyward, fruit heavy and fragrant. You bend down to feel the texture of the soil, rich beneath your fingers despite the arid surroundings, and realize that these early people were not just farmers, they were inventors, engineers, and dreamers all at once. They understood that survival in the desert demanded intelligence as much as endurance. The air is dry but fragrant in an unexpected way. Earthy, mixed with faint traces of salt from the river and the subtle sweetness of ripening fruit. You imagine walking among these first settlements, small clusters of stone and earth rising like gentle hills, homes designed with simple brilliance to shield inhabitants from both scorching heat and occasional punishing rains. The plazas between the homes are spacious and organized, almost like someone had sketched the city before laying a single stone. Even without knowing the culture yet, you can sense a reverence for order, a quiet respect for community, and an appreciation for aesthetics that modern cities often overlook.
You notice that the river doesn't just nourish crops, it shapes lives. Children run along its banks laughing as their bare feet sink into wet mud, while elders trace the patterns of sand and water, mapping floodplains in their minds with remarkable precision. You might think it's just a river, but here it is the lifeblood of everything. The people of Caral relied on it for water, for fertile soil, and for trade. They even used it to spin threads of cotton into fishing nets, which would then be bartered with coastal communities. In your mind's eye, you see boats laden with nets and dried fish gliding along the sparkling waters, and the thought makes you realize how interconnected life here already was. The desert isn't silent. It carries sounds in its own way. The soft whistle of wind over stone, the distant splash of water against riverbanks, the faint cries of birds circling overhead. You notice these details because the people of Caral would have noticed them too, using them to guide their daily activities. Imagine sitting at the river's edge at dawn, watching the sun paint the desert in golds and oranges, and understanding that every element, the light, the water, the soil, the wind, was part of a vast living puzzle that determined survival. They had no metal tools yet, no wheel, no beasts of burden, and still they thrived in ways that would make a modern engineer nod in awe.
As you wander further from the river, your imagination fills in the social fabric of this early civilization. Families cluster near fields, artisans work with clay and stone, and leaders, or perhaps elders who carry the wisdom of generations, move quietly among the people, coordinating planting schedules, communal gatherings, and ceremonial events. You notice how human ingenuity extends beyond crops and irrigation. It shapes relationships, organizes labor, and fosters trade. Cotton is not just fiber. It is a tool, a currency, a connector between communities. Beans and squash aren't just food. They are sustenance, tradition, and survival. You might pause here, feeling slightly overwhelmed. It's almost too easy to romanticize this desert life. But think carefully. It's harsh, unyielding, and unforgiving. The people of Caral were resilient because they understood limits and possibilities, because they observed, experimented, and collaborated. They built not merely to survive, but to flourish. That's the first lesson of this journey. Civilization doesn't always roar in grand conquests or armies. Sometimes it whispers in the sand, waits patiently for humans who are willing to listen and adapt.
As the sun begins to settle, you imagine shadows stretching across stone homes and small plazas, children gathering fruit, and adults discussing irrigation or trade. The river sparkles in the fading light, hinting at the next day's potential. You can almost hear the laughter of the first settlers, echoes carried across millennia, whispering stories that will later inspire archaeologists, historians, and anyone willing to pause and look closely at what the desert has to offer. And here, as evening falls over the Supe Valley, you understand something profound. History is not just a collection of dates or artifacts. It is an experience, a layering of human ingenuity and emotion upon the landscape. You, wandering here in your imagination, become part of that continuum. The desert is alive with possibility, and you can feel the pulse of early life vibrating faintly beneath your feet. It's calm, it's beautiful, and yes, it's slightly dangerous, but only if you forget to respect the forces that made the survival possible. Tonight, as you imagine Caral awakening under the golden sun and gentle river breezes, take a moment to feel the rhythm of early life. Notice the smell of wet soil, the warmth of stone, the gentle laughter of children, the soft murmur of flowing water. You are part of this story now, not as a conqueror, not as an outsider, but as a witness, gently stepping through the sands of time, feeling the first sparks of civilization flicker and grow. The desert is patient. It waits. And tonight, you wait with it, observing, learning, imagining, and preparing for the next step of the journey.
You follow the river a little farther, letting the sand give way to richer soil, and notice the first signs of Caral's ingenuity in agriculture. You can almost feel the hands of early farmers pressing the earth, scooping, smoothing, and shaping it into tiny channels that carry water with precision you'd think required a degree in engineering. It's fascinating because they didn't have calculators or blueprints, just observation, experience, and a lot of trial and error. Imagine the patience it must have taken, the way they studied seasonal floods and rainfall patterns, understanding which fields would thrive and which would falter. You'd probably give up after a week, but these people kept learning, adjusting, improving, and somehow coaxing life out of what looked like unforgiving desert. You kneel near one of the irrigation channels, watching tiny streams of water trickle along the carefully leveled banks. It's mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. You might think, it's just water, but here it is everything. Sustenance, trade, and survival. Cotton fields sway gently nearby, each plant a small miracle in a landscape that seems to resist life itself. And you notice the versatility. Cotton spun into nets for fishing, woven into cloth for clothing and barter. Trade was already forming along the river and toward the coast, a gentle web connecting Caral to communities you can barely imagine. You realize that civilization doesn't always announce itself with grand monuments. Sometimes it whispers through furrows of earth and ripples of water.
The air carries a hint of sweetness, the mingling aroma of ripening fruit and warm soil, almost like the desert is holding its breath. You can picture families moving quietly among the fields, baskets balanced on their heads, hands brushing leaves and soil, tending crops with care. You probably wouldn't survive a day without proper shoes, sunscreen, and water, but they did this every day, not for fame or glory, but for life itself. Their survival wasn't brute force, it was intelligence, collaboration, and persistence. And if you're paying attention, you start noticing small details. The clever use of stone terraces to prevent erosion, the placement of fields to catch optimal sunlight, and subtle windbreaks that protected seedlings from harsh gusts. You wander further and imagine the children helping. They carry small bundles of produce, chase one another along sun-baked paths, and maybe sneak a bite of fruit from low-hanging branches. There's laughter, chatter, and the occasional scold from an elder, all blending into the rhythm of daily life. You start to understand that Caral's brilliance wasn't just in its monuments or trade. It was in its people. Every person contributed, every small action mattered, and every season was an opportunity to learn and refine. You might be imagining too much, but that's part of the charm. History is alive if you let it breathe, and here, in Caral, it certainly does. Nearby, the river widens slightly, forming shallow pools that sparkle under the morning sun. You imagine men and women wading through the water, nets in hand, fishing for sustenance. The dried fish would later become a staple for trade, exchanged for goods from faraway communities. You could almost hear the faint plop of fish landing in baskets, the laughter of children watching from the banks, and the gentle murmuring of adults negotiating with one another over trade routes or planting schedules. Caral is not just a city. It's a living organism, a network of relationships, commerce, and shared knowledge, all thriving in a place you might have called barren at first glance.
And then there's the cotton. You lean closer and notice the fibers, delicate yet resilient, twisting together in small clumps that promise a world of utility. It's amazing to consider that these tiny plants formed the foundation of a trade system that connected coastal villages, distant highlands, and the heart of the Supe Valley. You're seeing, quite literally, the threads of civilization being spun right before your eyes. And as your mind wanders, you realize just how extraordinary this is. Without writing, Without currency as we know it, without armies or fortresses, these people managed to organize society, trade goods, and maintain balance with nature in a way that modern humans still admire. You might pause here to think about the architecture. Even though you're focused on agriculture, the shapes of homes and plazas appear in your imagination. Simple, yes, but thoughtfully constructed. Stone foundations, walls of earth, roofs designed to keep out both heat and rare but violent rains. You imagine families gathering in sunken plazas, the air cool even when the desert burns, sharing meals, stories, and perhaps music. It's easy to forget that these spaces were multifunctional. Home, community center, ceremonial site, all rolled into one. There is a quiet genius in this. The people of Caral understood that civilization is not only what you build, but also how you live together. As your imagination drifts, you notice small innovations scattered everywhere. Reed baskets strong enough to carry stones for pyramid construction, simple tools shaped from bone and wood, clever drainage channels near homes to prevent flooding. You probably wouldn't think much of these as a modern observer, but each one is a testament to practical problem solving. And some of it still raises questions today. Historians still wonder exactly how they transported massive stones for construction without draft animals. It seems almost impossible, yet here it is, in your mind, the evidence of ingenuity and sheer determination.
Walking along the riverbank, you can almost hear the conversations of early traders. Cotton for dried fish, perhaps some shells from distant shores, or rare stones carried down from the highlands. You might laugh thinking about haggling over a few pounds of dried fish, but this was life and livelihood. Caral didn't grow through conquest or war. It grew through exchange, collaboration, and understanding the needs of neighbors. You can almost sense a subtle, joyful pride in the people as they navigate the complexity of trade, an early example of how human ingenuity manifests in ordinary moments, quietly shaping society. And of course, there is music. You tilt your head and imagine the sound of flutes carved from condor bones, small drums stretched with animal hides, and whistles fashioned from deer antlers. Not every note is perfectly tuned, perhaps that's the point, but the sound carries across the river, across the fields, across the very air that connects people to one another and to the land. You notice that even in the absence of writing, they communicate ideas, rhythms, and cultural identity through sound. You might even hum a few bars in your mind, feeling that connection to a civilization long past, yet alive in the imagination. By now, the sun has shifted, casting long shadows across the gentle slopes and irrigation channels. You pause, taking in the scene. Children playing near water, elders teaching lessons about soil and water, families gathering food, and the soft music threading through the valley. The complexity is subtle but profound. You realize that Caral wasn't just a city. It was a living, breathing symphony of people, environment, and ingenuity. And as you walk along the river, you feel the pulse of civilization itself, a quiet, enduring heartbeat that refuses to be silenced by time.
You might wonder how a place so dependent on the river and climate managed the inevitable challenges. Droughts must have tested their resolve. Floods might have destroyed fields, yet they adapted. Historians still debate the specifics of their water management systems, but what you can be sure of is that these people understood balance. Every stone,
Every furrow, every woven basket had its purpose. Civilization here is a delicate interplay of observation, labor, and foresight. You feel a subtle awe at the realization that survival was not about domination, it was about harmony, and they achieved it beautifully. As evening approaches, you imagine the river glinting gold under the setting sun. The fields, full of life and promise, stretch away in neat rows. Children's laughter fades into the distance. Elders call out instructions or advice, and the gentle hum of daily life settles into a quiet rhythm. You notice that even the desert seems to exhale, softening the harshness of its day into something almost nurturing. Caral is not just surviving here, it is thriving, quietly and ingeniously, and you are privileged to witness its story, even if only in your imagination.
You step away from the fields, following a narrow path toward the heart of Caral, and the city begins to reveal itself, layer by layer, like peeling back a desert onion. The first thing that strikes you is the precision of the layout. Streets aren't chaotic, they curve gently, almost intuitively, guiding water, wind, and people with subtle intention. You might not notice it at first, but each plaza, each residential block, and each open space seems to have been considered carefully, designed for balance and flow. It's easy to imagine someone saying, "I'll just put the houses anywhere." But here, nothing is random. You wander into a residential zone, imagining the daily life of its inhabitants. Families live in compact homes made from stone foundations and earthen walls, roofs that offer shade from the relentless sun. It's not luxurious by modern standards, but it is functional and thoughtful. You probably wouldn't survive a night without a sturdy roof over your head, and yet these structures have endured for thousands of years, testament to clever construction. You notice the clever placement of storage pits near each home, perfect for preserving grains, tubers, and other harvested goods. Even the smallest details, doorways, hearths, small benches, speak of intentionality. Near one of the open plazas, children play with simple toys, perhaps carved wooden figures or small stones. The sound of laughter carries across the low buildings, mingling with the gentle hum of everyday life. You probably wouldn't notice how effortless this seems, but there is mastery in the mundane. Every activity, from weaving to watering plants, contributes to the smooth functioning of the city.
And then there are the pyramids. You see them in the distance, rising not arrogantly, but purposefully, each stone seemingly whispering, "I belong here." You walk closer, noticing the careful layering, the wide staircases, and the broad platforms at the summit. The largest pyramid stretches over 450 feet in length, a marvel of construction even without the tools you take for granted today. You probably wouldn't be able to lift a single stone, yet here they are, stacked, shaped, and aligned with a precision that feels almost intentional, as if the builders were speaking to the stars themselves. You pause at the base and notice the sunken plazas, circular and inviting. You imagine hundreds of people gathering here, the air filled with quiet anticipation for ceremonies or communal decisions. You might laugh, imagining yourself trying to organize a group that large without any technology, but somehow they managed it effortlessly. Historians still wonder exactly how the acoustics were intended to work, yet you can almost hear the faint hum of drums and flutes across the sunken space, designed to carry sound evenly so that no whisper, no chant is lost. You wander along a side alley and catch a glimpse of artisans at work. They craft small statues, pottery, and intricate woven fabrics. You notice subtle decorations that likely held spiritual or ceremonial significance. You probably wouldn't recognize the symbolism without guidance, but the effort is undeniable. Even the smallest items reveal the culture's attention to detail, reverence for beauty, and subtle storytelling. Trade routes brought in exotic stones and shells, and in exchange, the people of Caral sent out finely crafted textiles and tools. You start to understand that commerce wasn't just about survival. It was a way to connect, communicate, and weave a society together.
Stepping back into the main plaza, you take a deep breath, imagining the city in full swing. Priests, administrators, and farmers all move with purpose, yet there's no rush, no chaos. Each person seems to know their role, contributing to the collective. You might think this sounds utopian, but here, centuries ago, it was reality. You notice the symmetry in design. Homes surrounding plazas, pyramids aligned with celestial events, waterways running parallel to streets. Even without written language, the organization is evident, and you marvel at the thoughtfulness embedded in every corner. You look skyward and see the first stars emerging above the desert. It occurs to you that these celestial bodies weren't just decoration, they were guides. The people of Caral aligned structures with solstices, sunrises, and key stars, planning planting and harvesting cycles accordingly. You probably wouldn't manage this level of precision, but they did, season after season, year after year. And this attention to celestial rhythm isn't just practical, it's spiritual, a quiet connection to something bigger, an acknowledgement that life and universe are intertwined. The plaza quiets as the day passes, and the smell of evening air mixes with the aroma of cooked grains, roasted tubers, and drying fish. You probably wouldn't be able to resist sampling the food if you could. But even from a distance, you sense the harmony of flavors, the careful attention to sustenance. Life in Caral is grounded in cycles, in giving attention to what sustains both body and society. You notice the communal care for children, the shared responsibilities, the unspoken understanding that cooperation is more vital than individual gain.
As night settles, you hear the first notes of music, softly rising from a nearby gathering. Flutes, small drums, and whistles, carefully tuned, echoing across the open spaces. You might tap your foot in rhythm, even if subtly. Historians still debate the scale of musical education in Caral, but there's no doubt that sound was a central part of communal life. Music threads through celebration, worship, and the mundane. Even the architecture supports it, shaping how the air carries sound, emphasizing a quiet but powerful orchestration of daily experience. You wandered to the foot of one of the smaller pyramids, imagining rituals taking place at the summit. Fires crackle at the top, incense or offerings burn gently, and the community watches from below. You probably wouldn't survive climbing those wide, steep staircases repeatedly. But here it is, an entire society orchestrated around shared spiritual and civic life. You notice that the rituals aren't violent, they aren't meant to intimidate or subjugate, but they are unifying, drawing people together, reminding them of their place in both the community and the cosmos. By now, the sky is fully dark, stars brilliant overhead. You can imagine families settling near fires, sharing stories, laughing, resting after a day of labor and ceremony. You notice the quiet discipline, the gentle structure, the balance between work, ritual, and leisure. Historians still debate why Caral didn't adopt fortifications or military structures seen elsewhere. But you might guess the answer. Here, peace wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate choice, woven into the very design of city and society, a choice that allowed creativity, trade, and cultural development to flourish.
The river reflects the starlight as you trace its curves from the city's edge, imagining the interconnectedness of homes, plazas, fields, and monuments. You probably wouldn't have noticed it in the day, but at night there's a rhythm, almost musical, to how the water, buildings, and open spaces interact. Caral hums quietly with life, a harmony you might only perceive with patience. And as you step back, looking at the full scene, you start to understand something crucial. Civilization doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it thrives in whispers, in small acts of care, in deliberate, thoughtful design. You pause to reflect on the sheer longevity of it all. These structures, these canals, these sunken plazas, they will last millennia, long after individual people are gone. You probably wouldn't grasp the effort required to ensure such endurance, but there it is, proof of careful observation, adaptation, and an almost spiritual respect for the environment. And as you settle into the rhythm of Caral at night, you feel the pulse of human ingenuity, quiet, steady, and profoundly enduring. You step away from the grand plazas and pyramids, venturing toward the outskirts of Caral, where the fields stretch in neat, organized patterns, and the river's seasonal pulse dictates the rhythm of life. The sun is higher now, warming the desert floor, and you probably wouldn't last long under this glare without a hat or some shade. Yet here, life thrives. Irrigation channels snake across the valley like veins, carrying precious water to cotton, beans, squash, and sweet potatoes. You notice the ingenuity immediately. Each channel carefully angled, stones placed to slow or accelerate water flow, and tiny gates that could control distribution with precision. Walking along the fields, you see workers tending crops with patience that borders on meditative. You probably wouldn't find this soothing if you were hauling baskets yourself, but there's a rhythm to their movements, a harmony with the land that is almost musical. The cotton plants are particularly striking, their fluffy white balls catching the sunlight, ready to be harvested. You notice the leaves rustling in a gentle wind and almost feel the texture of the cotton, soft, delicate, yet resilient. It's a reminder that beauty and utility often coexist in ways you might overlook in the rush of modern life. Nearby, women weave fishing nets from cotton fibers, their hands moving skillfully and almost unconsciously. You probably wouldn't realize that these nets are more than tools, they're lifelines for coastal trade, a medium of connection between Caral and distant villages. Dried fish, fruits, and handmade goods move through these networks, creating bonds that stretch far beyond the desert. There's a quiet genius in it. Nothing is wasted, everything has a purpose, and the city thrives because each person understands the larger system. You might chuckle to yourself imagining modern trade with such simplicity, yet here it works flawlessly.
You pause by a small canal and peer into its clear water, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Small fish dart beneath the surface, oblivious to the humans above. You probably wouldn't think much of it, but the people of Caral relied on this ecosystem with a delicate balance. Too much irrigation and the crops might suffer. Too little and survival is threatened. They had no engineering manuals, no textbooks, yet their understanding of the land was sophisticated. They adapted to the river's moods, learning its rhythm, respecting its power, and building a sustainable relationship that lasted centuries. Historians still debate exactly how they managed these irrigation feats so precisely without written schematics, but the evidence is undeniable. Beyond the fields, small workshops dot the landscape. Artisans at work creating textiles, pottery, and ornaments. You notice the concentration, the dexterity, the almost artistic joy in their labor. You probably wouldn't have patience for such repetitive work, but here it's part of the city's pulse. Trade goods are produced with care for both practical use and ceremonial purpose. And while the artisans' creations are functional, they also carry meaning, symbols, patterns, and textures reflecting beliefs, stories, and shared identity.
The city isn't just surviving, it's cultivating culture, art, and connection. As you wander further, you notice livestock, llamas and guinea pigs, modest in number but valuable in utility. They're grazed carefully, integrated into the agricultural system, and serve multiple purposes: meat, wool, and even fertilizer for the fields. You probably wouldn't think of them as part of a grand city system, but here they're essential. Caral's people understood that survival required harmony not only with the land, but with the creatures that inhabit it. There is no chaos in their relationship with animals. Everything has its place, its role, and its purpose.
The sun begins to dip lower, painting the valley in soft amber light. You probably wouldn't notice the subtle cues that signal evening if you weren't paying attention, but here, these signals dictate action. Fields are tended, fires are lit, and people begin transitioning from labor to social and ceremonial life. You wander back toward the smaller pyramids and sunken plazas, now preparing for the day's final rituals. You might feel the anticipation in the air, a quiet excitement that hums across the stone and earth. Even without understanding the exact spiritual meaning, you sense the reverence, the community, and a connection to forces beyond immediate comprehension. Music rises again, flutes, drums, and whistles mingling with the wind. You probably wouldn't recognize the scale of their musical arrangement, but sound carries beautifully across the plazas, structured yet natural, filling every corner of the city. Children chase each other along the edges, their laughter threading through the melodies. Adults participate in rituals, moving with care and attention, marking the cycles of day and night, planting and harvest. Historians still wonder how much of this was spontaneous and how much strictly codified, but the effect is undeniable. Life and ceremony blend seamlessly, a continuous, living narrative. You stroll closer to the pyramid's broad staircases, imagining people ascending with offerings, chanting in harmony with the wind. Fires burn on the summit, not as warnings or weapons, but as symbols of community and spiritual presence. You probably wouldn't survive the climb carrying even a small basket of offerings repeatedly, but here, generations of people did this without hesitation. The pyramids aren't tombs, they're living centers of governance, worship, and cultural celebration, and the city radiates life in ways that words can barely capture.
Observing the alignment of the structures, you notice subtle precision. Certain walls and terraces point towards specific solstices and stars, guiding seasonal planning and spiritual observation. You probably wouldn't understand all the astronomical knowledge encoded here, but it's clear they tracked the heavens with attention and care. Caral is not random, it is deliberate, mathematically minded, and spiritually rich. Every choice, from irrigation channels to pyramid orientation, speaks of a civilization profoundly in tune with its environment and cosmos. You wander along a narrow path toward a smaller temple, noticing offerings carefully laid along its edges. Seeds, shells, small woven items. They tell silent stories of gratitude, devotion, and continuity. You probably wouldn't recognize the meaning of each token, but the intention is palpable. Caral's people lived with a deep awareness that daily life and spiritual life are inseparable, a lesson still relevant to anyone willing to notice the patterns around them. Night falls fully now, and the stars reflect in the river as the city settles into calm. Fires flicker softly across the plazas, and the hum of life gradually softens. You probably wouldn't imagine that such tranquility could exist in an ancient city. Yet, here it is. The balance of labor, ceremony, community, and environment
has created a gentle, enduring rhythm that you can almost feel pulsing beneath your feet. Even without understanding every detail, the effect is profound. A civilization designed to endure, harmonize, and flourish quietly over millennia.
As you take a final walk along the riverbank, you reflect on the subtle genius of Caral. Their achievements weren't loud or flashy. They weren't built on conquest or coercion, but on understanding, cooperation, and creativity. You probably wouldn't think such methods could sustain a city for thousands of years. Yet here you stand, witness to evidence that human ingenuity can thrive in patience, subtlety, and collaboration. And as you gaze at the horizon, lit by fading sunlight, you start to understand the unspoken truth. Some of the most extraordinary civilizations are not the ones that dominate, but the ones that quietly shape life for the better, leaving lessons hidden beneath the sands for those willing to notice.
You step away from the river and the fields, wandering toward the heart of Caral, where the residential complexes cluster. The sun has fully set now, leaving the desert bathed in soft twilight, and you probably wouldn't notice how quickly the temperature drops if you weren't watching. Here, homes rise modestly from stone and earth, their walls thick and cool, designed to hold in both heat and chill. You pause to observe the intricate construction, small courtyards within the walls, open to the sky for light and air, yet offering shelter from the fierce winds that sweep through the valley. It's practical, elegant, and somehow comforting. You step closer to a group of houses where children are playing quietly in the courtyards. Their laughter threads through the stone alleys like music, joining the flutes and drums that linger faintly from the plazas. You probably wouldn't expect such serenity in an ancient city, yet it's here, palpable and persistent. The families live in harmony, and the communal layout encourages connection. Open walkways, shared spaces, and proximity to the city's ceremonial centers mean that no one is truly isolated and everyone participates in the life of the city. A woman sits at the threshold of her home, weaving a small mat from reeds. You notice the precision in her hands, the rhythm almost hypnotic, and you probably wouldn't have patience to replicate it yourself. Yet this simple act is more than craft. It is a quiet contribution to the community. Mats, baskets, textiles, and small tools flow through the neighborhood, and everyone's labor interlocks with everyone else's, building not just objects, but a shared culture. Even the smallest item carries meaning, reflecting both utility and identity.
Walking further, you see a small group of priests emerging from a temple. Their garments are woven with intricate patterns that glint in the dim light. You probably wouldn't guess how much of their time is spent in ceremonial preparation versus administration, but it is clear that these roles overlap. Leadership here relies not on force, but on trust, coordination, and the ability to guide the community through both spiritual and practical matters. Their presence ensures order, but also connection, a reminder that Caral's society is as much about relationship as it is about structure. You wander into one of the sunken plazas, now quiet as evening settles, and you notice the subtle echoes of previous ceremonies lingering in the air. You probably wouldn't hear much if you weren't paying close attention, but the sound carries differently across these designed spaces. The architecture amplifies even small movements, voices, or instruments, creating a sense that everything is larger than it seems. It's as if the stones themselves remember the steps, chants, and music of countless gatherings. Historians still wonder whether this acoustic design was intentional or simply a fortunate consequence of construction. But standing here, you can't help but feel the magic. A small group of musicians appears, practicing quietly with flutes carved from condor bones and small drums stretched with animal hides. You probably wouldn't recognize the scale of skill required to play these instruments, yet their tones are precise, resonant, and haunting. Even in informal practice, the musicians align perfectly with the plaza's natural acoustics, their music echoing in ways that seem to stretch time. Children listen from the edges, imitating rhythms with tiny sticks, connecting to tradition and culture in ways both obvious and subtle.
Nearby, artisans are still working late into the evening. You notice a potter shaping clay with care, smoothing the surface and marking it with delicate motifs. You probably wouldn't see the purpose of each line and pattern, but they carry meaning, spiritual, cultural, and practical. These items are not only for domestic use, but also for ritual, trade, and social connection. Each creation, each gesture weaves into the broader fabric of Caral, reinforcing both continuity and identity. Even the quietest acts contribute to the city's pulse. As night deepens, the pyramids rise as shadowed silhouettes against the starlit sky. You probably wouldn't imagine the coordination required to maintain these massive structures. Yet workers, past and present in your imagination, have labored for generations to perfect the alignment, the stone placement, and the structural stability. The largest pyramid, Pyramid Mayor, stretches far above you, its summit once alive with firelight and ceremony. Walking its base, you sense its weight, its permanence, and the vision of a civilization that dared to reach for the sky. Looking toward the smaller pyramids, you notice they too serve multiple purposes. Temples, meeting spaces, and ceremonial platforms all merge into a design that is both functional and symbolic. You probably wouldn't think much about the complexity if you were merely passing by, but the subtle alignment with celestial events, solstices, and star cycles shows extraordinary attention to detail. Caral is not a city of haphazard construction. It is deliberate, thoughtful, and woven tightly into the rhythm of the universe. Moving away from the pyramids, you step into the marketplace, still faintly active even at dusk. Traders exchange cotton for dried fish, shells, and exotic stones. You probably wouldn't notice the sophistication of this trade network, but it forms the lifeblood of the city. Goods and ideas flow effortlessly across distances, connecting Caral to distant villages and valleys. Even the smallest transactions carry meaning, linking survival, culture, and community in ways that are almost invisible unless you look closely. You pause to admire a string of shells from the Pacific, their colors brilliant even under fading light. You probably wouldn't associate them with complex social networks, but these small objects symbolize relationships, trade agreements, and shared history. Caral thrives not through conquest or coercion, but through exchange, trust, and cooperation. It's a lesson in subtle power, in the ability of a society to grow by nurturing connection rather than domination. The night air cools, and you feel the desert's quiet embrace. Fires flicker in distant plazas, and you notice the soft hum of human activity, a murmured conversation, the rhythmic tap of a musical practice, the occasional laughter of children. You probably wouldn't feel the cohesion if you weren't attuned, but it's undeniable. Caral is alive in subtle, enduring ways. Even without armies or walls, the city is strong, resilient, and deeply interconnected. Finally, as you return toward the riverbank, you pause to gaze at the reflections of the pyramids and houses shimmering on the water's surface. You probably wouldn't appreciate the artistry and foresight required to create such a city in a harsh desert. But standing here, it's impossible not to admire the ingenuity,
care, and spirit that built this place. Every stone, every canal, every flute or drumbeat is part of a larger vision, a civilization designed to endure, to connect, and to celebrate life itself. And as the night deepens fully, you take a deep breath, absorbing the stillness, the history, and the quiet hum of a city that has existed for thousands of years. You probably wouldn't survive a day here as the ancients did, but observing from the edge, you sense their rhythm, their wisdom, and their extraordinary humanity. Caral was more than a city. It was a living testament to patience, creativity, and harmony. A gentle reminder that civilization can rise quietly, thoughtfully, and beautifully without ever shedding blood.
You follow the narrow pathways that weave through Caral's residential zones, where each home seems thoughtfully placed, neither too close nor too distant from its neighbor. The wind rustles gently through the reeds and grasses lining the streets, carrying faint scents of baked clay, dried fish, and river moss. You probably wouldn't notice all the subtle details if you weren't paying attention. The slightly raised thresholds to keep water out during rare floods, the rounded corners of walls designed to absorb and disperse the occasional tremor of an earthquake. Caral is full of these small touches, reminders that its people lived in careful harmony with their environment. As you approach one of the larger plazas, the sun has dipped low, and the shadows stretch long across the stone floors. You probably wouldn't expect a place built thousands of years ago to feel so intimate, but the layout draws you in. The sunken, circular design creates a natural amphitheater effect. Sound carries differently here, emphasizing voices, footsteps, and the low murmur of ceremonies that would have once filled this space. Even empty, the plaza has a personality, a quiet presence that hints at countless rituals, festivals, and daily interactions. A group of artisans works late, shaping clay pots and weaving reeds for baskets. You probably wouldn't recognize the subtle ingenuity behind their crafts, the way each container is reinforced to hold liquids, the choice of patterns that communicate both beauty and identity. One potter shapes a small water jar, pressing intricate lines into its surface. The quirk of history, some patterns indicate trade partners far away, almost like an ancient social media signature, telling anyone who sees the item where it came from and where it might travel. Historians still wonder if every mark was purely functional, symbolic, or a combination of both. But standing here, it feels purposeful.
You move to a cluster of homes near the river, and a faint scent of cooked corn and roasted beans reaches you. You probably wouldn't have expected food to be so central to the rhythm of life, but in Caral, every meal is a reflection of balance. Protein from dried fish, vitamins from fruits and vegetables, and energy from beans and squash. These are not just staples. They are part of a larger plan to sustain a community without overtaxing the fragile desert ecosystem. Even the choice of crops, their rotation and storage methods demonstrate an understanding that modern agronomists still study today. Nearby, a small group of children plays a game with stones, tossing and catching them in patterns that might seem random to an outsider. You probably wouldn't see it at first, but there's strategy, practice, and tradition embedded in their movements. Games, it seems, were not just for fun. They trained coordination, memory, and cooperation, subtly preparing the next generation for the practical demands of Caral life. You notice how laughter and learning blend seamlessly, part of the social glue that keeps the city cohesive. You wander past a modest temple, built with woven reed mats and stone, noticing the faint traces of incense lingering in the air. You probably wouldn't think much of its scale compared to the massive pyramids, yet this small structure holds immense significance. Inside, offerings of fruits, shells, and finely spun cotton lie carefully arranged. A quirky detail, some of these offerings include miniature woven animals, symbolic gestures that hint at a playful spirituality woven into everyday devotion. Historians still debate whether these were purely religious symbols or also served as teaching tools for children. But standing here, you sense both reverence and whimsy.
The pyramids, visible even from this distance, dominate the skyline, their silhouettes gradually blending with the deepening blue of evening. You probably wouldn't imagine the coordination required to align them with solar and stellar events, yet Caral's architects did so with remarkable precision. The orientation ensured that solstices and equinoxes could be marked without written records, guiding planting, harvesting, and ceremonial schedules. There's a gentle awe in realizing that long before telescopes or modern instruments, the people of Caral read the sky with exactitude and patience. You notice a priest carefully carrying a small clay drum to the plaza, its surface taut and polished. You probably wouldn't appreciate how integral music is to maintaining social rhythm, yet in Caral, it's indispensable. Every beat and tone connects individuals to one another, to the land, and to the cosmos. Drums, flutes, and whistles weren't merely entertainment. They were the city's pulse, subtle but constant, creating cohesion and signaling the passage of time and events. Even now, as you imagine the first notes reverberating through the evening air, it's almost hypnotic. The trade network that binds Caral begins to reveal itself more clearly as you wander. You see the exchange of goods along quiet side paths, dried fish traded for colorful shells, cotton ropes for exotic stones, fruit for reeds. You probably wouldn't recognize the full scope of this commerce at a glance, but the city thrives on it. Caral was never isolated. It depended on relationships, negotiation, and trust, creating a web of interconnection that stretched across the valleys and beyond. Trade, not conquest, was its strongest defense and most enduring legacy.
Moving toward the river once again, the gentle lapping of water calms your senses. You probably wouldn't survive long here without understanding its value. But the river is the city's lifeblood, carefully managed with canals and irrigation systems. Even in times of scarcity, every drop is guided with intention. You notice the precision, small levees, channels, and reservoirs designed to maximize efficiency and minimize waste. This level of engineering might seem unremarkable today, but in a civilization without modern tools, it's extraordinary. Above you, the stars begin to emerge, tiny pinpricks of light in the deepening night sky. You probably wouldn't connect constellations with practical purposes, yet Caral's people did. Observing the heavens, they timed agricultural cycles, ceremonial events, and even construction schedules. Astronomy wasn't just fascination, it was survival, woven seamlessly into spiritual and civic life. You can almost imagine a priest pointing to the night sky, guiding the city through the seasons with confidence born of careful observation. You pause at a quiet corner where a young couple is weaving nets by the flicker of a small fire. You probably wouldn't notice the cultural significance of cotton nets in trade and sustenance. Yet these humble items are central to the city's economy. A small playful detail. Some nets are dyed with subtle patterns that identify the maker's home or family, an ancient signature embedded in daily life. These seemingly minor details build identity, trust, and continuity across generations, a thread that ties the city together in ways both obvious and hidden.
Finally, you step back to take in the city as a whole. From the pyramids to the residential complexes, from the sunken plazas to the irrigation canals, every element seems to hum in quiet harmony. You probably wouldn't see this cohesion if you were merely passing through, but spending time observing patterns and noticing the small rhythms of life reveals a civilization built on cooperation, foresight, and care. Caral is alive not in the chaos of conflict, but in the steady, enduring pulse of everyday life, a testament to patience and ingenuity.
As the desert night envelops you completely, you feel a deep sense of calm. Fires burn faintly on distant platforms. The murmur of evening life echoes through alleys and courtyards, and the stars above seem to watch in silent admiration. You probably wouldn't survive a full day as a citizen here, yet observing the rhythms, the ingenuity, and the quiet joys of life, it's impossible not to feel awe. Caral isn't just a city, it is a living lesson in how humans, guided by intelligence, cooperation, and a touch of artistry, can flourish even in the harshest environments.
You walk along a narrow stone path, your feet crunching lightly over sand and gravel, guided by the faint glow of the last embers from distant fires. You probably wouldn't realize just how intentional every step was. The streets of Caral aren't random. They're designed to guide, to connect, to shape the experience of daily life. Even small turns and slight inclines serve subtle purposes, directing water flow, emphasizing ceremonial processions, or simply giving each home a view of the river that nourishes it. There's a rhythm here, an unspoken choreography that guides both movement and interaction. Near a modest plaza, you notice the soft flicker of lamps made from hollowed clay filled with rendered animal fat. You probably wouldn't appreciate the ingenuity behind these simple light sources, yet they illuminate not only streets, but also opportunities for late-night conversation, quiet reflection, and sometimes clandestine trade. One night, a merchant might whisper about distant lands, a child might sketch the stars with sticks in the dirt, and a priest might quietly mark a celestial event that others would only realize the next morning. Caral hums quietly, but always with purpose. A group of women is weaving, their fingers flying over cotton threads. You probably wouldn't know that each pattern carries meaning beyond decoration. Some designs signal familial lineage, others denote trade partnerships, and a few even serve as subtle storytelling, recording events, journeys, and achievements without a single written word. These fabrics aren't just practical, they're a living archive of memory and identity. Standing there, watching the threads cross and twist, you realize that creativity and utility are inseparable here.
The pyramids loom above you once more, their stone surfaces cool under the evening sky. You probably wouldn't notice the small carvings hidden in plain sight, tiny channels that guide rainwater and small niches designed to reduce seismic stress. There's a quiet genius in these structures that transcends raw scale. Caral's builders didn't just want massive pyramids, they wanted lasting pyramids, monuments that could endure not only time, but the natural forces that relentlessly push against civilization. Music drifts toward you from a distant plaza. You probably wouldn't recognize the complexity of these soundscapes, the deep thrum of drums layered with high-pitched whistles, flutes tuned to carry melodies across open space, and the rhythmic stamping of hundreds of feet moving in unison. It's almost hypnotic, like the city itself is breathing in sync with its people. Music isn't merely entertainment. It's a signal, a ritual, and a means of aligning collective spirit. Each note resonates not just in the air, but in the hearts of everyone within earshot. As you wander, you catch glimpses of trade goods being moved carefully between homes and workshops. You probably wouldn't realize how vital each item is to Caral's delicate ecosystem. Cotton, for instance, isn't just a fabric, it's the backbone of commerce, a medium that binds the city to coastal communities, enabling a peaceful exchange of resources. Dried fish and colorful shells come in return, weaving a network that stretches across valleys and rivers. The success of Caral isn't measured by conquest, but by the skillful weaving of relationships, both social and economic.
You pause near a small canal, listening to water trickle over stones. You probably wouldn't survive long here without respecting this element. Water is Caral's lifeblood. The irrigation system is deceptively simple, but it reflects decades, perhaps centuries, of careful observation. Channels lead water directly to fields, minimizing waste, while overflow areas ensure that nothing is lost. Each drop is precious, managed with precision that might impress even modern engineers. The people of Caral didn't just farm, they orchestrated a symphony of survival. A curious detail catches your eye: small animal figurines hidden among homes and plazas. You probably wouldn't think much of them at first glance, but these tiny sculptures served as more than decoration. Some suggest they were talismans for protection. Others think they were playful reminders of stories and myths that entertained children and adults alike. Historians still debate the exact purpose, yet there's no denying that they add warmth and personality to the city. These minor touches show a people who value joy, even in the midst of survival. You continue along a broad staircase leading to a mid-sized temple. You probably wouldn't notice the subtle acoustics designed to amplify the softest whisper or chant. Yet this architectural choice reveals a culture that prioritized communication, ceremony, and shared experience. Priests could be heard clearly across the plaza below, ensuring unity in ritual and intention. The careful blending of form and function, practicality and reverence speaks to a city where every decision serves multiple purposes.
The smell of roasted maize drifts toward you, mingling with the river's fresh scent. You probably wouldn't consider food to be a tool of cohesion, but in Caral, meals were communal, a reminder of interdependence. Families and neighbors gathered, shared stories, and reinforced bonds while breaking bread, or rather, roasted corn and fish. These everyday rituals reinforced the city's peace-oriented values, teaching younger generations cooperation, patience, and gratitude for the gifts of nature. Looking up, the night sky stretches endlessly, filled with stars and the faint glow of planets just rising above the horizon. You probably wouldn't connect celestial patterns with everyday life, yet Caral's astronomers did. They mapped the stars for practical purposes, timing planting, harvesting, and ceremonial events. There's a quiet elegance in knowing that the universe, vast and unyielding, was a silent partner in their daily life, a celestial calendar that guided the city's rhythm. Nearby, children chase one another along a small alleyway, their laughter echoing faintly through stone corridors. You probably wouldn't think their games carry wisdom, yet they do, teaching agility, teamwork, and creativity. These exercises were as integral to city life as agriculture, trade, and ritual. Even leisure, it seems, had a purpose here, cultivating skills that would serve both the individual and the collective.
You wander past a small workshop where a craftsman is repairing fishing nets. You probably wouldn't recognize the ingenuity behind the materials, the tightly woven cotton threads, the careful knots, and the ingenious use of river reeds to strengthen the edges. Every net is tested for durability, and each repair is an exercise in precision. Caral's artisans were practical engineers as much as they were creators, blending functionality with subtle beauty in ways that leave an impression even millennia later. Finally, you pause at the edge of a riverbank, gazing across the water to distant pyramids, faintly lit by moonlight. You probably wouldn't survive long here without understanding both the beauty and the danger of your surroundings. Yet, standing in quiet reflection, it's impossible not to feel awe. Caral thrives not through force, but through intelligence, ingenuity, and careful observation of nature. Its success is subtle, understated, and deeply human. A civilization that endured because its people understood the delicate balance between ambition, environment, and community. The night settles fully around you. Faint sounds of ritual music and distant conversation mingle with the river's soft murmur.
You probably wouldn't imagine life here without constant attention to detail. But now, standing quietly, the city feels alive, humming with purpose, patience, and the echoes of thousands of thoughtful, deliberate lives. Caral isn't a story of conquest or bloodshed, it's a story of connection, ingenuity, and the quiet rhythm of human civilization at its most harmonious.
You step into the warm light of dawn, the horizon just beginning to glow with soft apricot and lavender tones. The air carries the faint scent of earth and river, and the city seems to stretch and yawn as if waking from a deep, centuries-old slumber. You probably wouldn't realize it at first, but each street, each plaza, and each canal has been carefully oriented to catch this early light, bathing the city in a gentle glow that both guides movement and elevates daily life. The builders of Caral weren't just architects, they were orchestrators of experience, embedding subtle cues for well-being and harmony into every corner. You wander toward the edge of a sunken plaza, noticing the shallow steps descending like gentle terraces. You probably wouldn't survive long if you ignored the acoustics here. Sound travels in uncanny ways. A whisper at the bottom can be heard clearly across the entire square, allowing priests, leaders, and storytellers to communicate effectively without the need for raised voices. In a city without written laws or loud decrees, sound itself becomes an invisible organizing principle. Conversations, ceremonies, and laughter blend seamlessly, creating a tapestry of communal life that carries both practical and spiritual significance. Nearby, a group of women gathers to sort cotton fibers. You probably wouldn't think that cotton could hold so much power, yet these threads are the backbone of trade, art, and industry. Some fibers are spun into fishing nets sturdy enough to harvest river bounty. Others are woven into intricate textiles, which carry stories and identities to distant communities. Caral's economy pulses through these humble fibers, reminding you that even small, everyday materials can anchor a civilization when managed wisely.
The sound of children laughing drifts from a narrow alley, chasing one another with barefoot agility. You probably wouldn't guess that these games are also lessons in agility, strategy, and social negotiation. Each chase, each playful tumble, is a microcosm of life lessons passed down silently, yet effectively, from one generation to the next. In Caral, survival is taught not only through observation of nature or mastery of craft, but also through the embodied experience of play. You pause at a small canal where water trickles over stones, forming a subtle melody that seems to harmonize with the morning birdsong. You probably wouldn't recognize how advanced Caral's irrigation truly is. The channels, levees, and overflow areas are engineered to distribute water efficiently, sustaining crops without waste. In a desert environment, such mastery is the difference between thriving and faltering. The careful observation of seasonal floods, combined with ingenuity and patience, allows the city to flourish quietly against environmental odds. A few steps further, you notice small clay figurines tucked along the edges of homes and temples. You probably wouldn't think to examine them closely, but these little sculptures are rich with meaning. Talismanic protection, reminders of shared myths, or playful toys for children. Historians still wonder exactly how residents interacted with these artifacts daily, but one thing is clear. Caral's inhabitants found joy and symbolism in the tiniest details. Even in survival, there is room for play, reflection, and creativity.
You continue toward a modest temple where the early sunlight streams through carefully carved openings, casting soft patterns across the stone floors. You probably wouldn't notice how acoustics are subtly manipulated here, allowing prayers, chants, and ritual music to carry across the entire structure. This is a city designed to connect people not just to each other, but to the heavens, to cycles of nature, and to a rhythm larger than themselves.
architecture and spirituality intertwine, producing spaces that are practical, ceremonial, and profoundly moving. Nearby, artisans are preparing dried fish for trade. You probably wouldn't survive long in Caral without understanding the importance of such commerce. These preserved goods feed families, support distant markets, and establish networks of trust across regions. Trade is not just an economic activity here, it's a social glue that ties communities together, fostering peace and cooperation. Caral's stability rests on a foundation of careful resource management and mutually beneficial exchange, rather than conquest or coercion. The plaza begins to fill as families emerge from stone homes carrying baskets of maize, beans, and cotton. You probably wouldn't appreciate how every movement is choreographed with intention. Farmers, artisans, and children intersect in a quiet, unspoken dance that maintains harmony, efficiency, and order. Even the arrangement of homes and streets reflects a sophisticated understanding of human behavior, sunlight, and airflow. Caral is not just a city, it's a living organism, with each resident functioning as both individual and integral component.
You pause to watch a craftsman weaving a fishing net, the cotton threads crossing in deliberate, intricate patterns. You probably wouldn't think of this as engineering, but each knot, each reinforced edge is the result of both centuries of knowledge and keen observation. Function and beauty coexist effortlessly in every object, showing that creativity is inseparable from practicality. Caral is a city where problem-solving and artistry exist not as separate endeavors, but as complementary necessities. A gentle wind carries the scent of roasted fish and maize, blending with the soft fragrance of river reeds. You probably wouldn't survive here long without respecting nature's subtleties. The wind brings both comfort and warning, signaling weather changes and guiding agricultural decisions. Life in Caral is symbiotic. Understanding, respecting, and cooperating with the environment ensures survival and prosperity. Even small details, like the angle of a reed mat or the slope of a terrace, reflect this deep attunement to surroundings. You climb a slightly elevated pathway to get a better view of the city. From here, the pyramids dominate the skyline, not as tombs, but as centers of ceremony, governance, and community. You probably wouldn't realize how intentionally aligned they are with celestial events, marking solstices and equinoxes, guiding planting cycles, and providing a framework for ritual life. The pyramids are not mere structures, they're instruments connecting earth and sky, humanity and cosmos in a subtle yet powerful harmony.
In a quiet corner, you notice small flutes carved from condor bones, their polished surfaces catching morning light. You probably wouldn't guess that each instrument is tuned with precision, designed to carry sound across open plazas for ceremonies, gatherings, and music. Even without written language, communication flourishes in Caral through performance, rhythm, and collective attention. Every note is a thread in the fabric of society, weaving cohesion, identity, and shared experience. You stroll past a residential complex where families carry water, prepare food, and tend gardens. You probably wouldn't realize how carefully arranged these spaces are, balancing private life with communal interaction. Homes are close enough to foster connection, but spaced to provide autonomy and dignity. Caral's urban planning reflects not just practicality, but deep empathy for its inhabitants' daily rhythms, needs, and safety. The afternoon sun warms your shoulders as you meander through a winding alleyway lined with modest stone homes. You probably wouldn't notice it at first, but every corner and pathway has been deliberately planned. Narrow enough to create shade and cool air, yet wide enough for daily traffic. The streets of Caral reflect a sophisticated understanding of climate and comfort. In this city, practicality and design are inseparable. Even walking is part of an intentional, lived experience. A faint scent of baked maize drifts from a nearby oven. You probably wouldn't survive long here without appreciating the importance of food preservation and preparation. Maize is dried, ground, and stored with remarkable precision, providing sustenance through dry seasons and bridging the gaps between bountiful harvests. Caral's residents understand that food is more than fuel. It is a foundation for stability, social bonds, and trade. Some kernels are reserved for trade caravans heading toward distant valleys, proving that every small action has wider social and economic significance. You pause to observe a group of artisans at work. One shapes clay into small figurines, while another weaves cotton into intricate textiles. You probably wouldn't think of these as everyday tasks, but each creation carries meaning, status, and practical use. The figurines may serve as talismans or teaching tools, while the textiles and nets support both local needs and trade. In Caral, art and functionality coexist seamlessly, blurring the line between beauty and necessity. Historians still wonder how these objects influence social cohesion, but their presence suggests that creativity was central to daily life.
Nearby, a narrow canal trickles gently, feeding small vegetable patches along its banks. You probably wouldn't survive the arid climate without recognizing the brilliance of Caral's water management. Ingenious channels, levees, and reservoirs maximize every drop, turning a harsh landscape into fertile fields. Observing the gentle flow, you realize that irrigation here is not just about survival, it is an act of harmony, a conversation between humans and the environment. Every crop, every garden plot is a testament to patience, observation, and skill. Children run past, barefoot and laughing, chasing one another through the sunlit streets. You probably wouldn't guess that these games serve as informal education. Through play, children learn agility, cooperation, and problem solving, the soft, unseen curriculum of a thriving society. Caral is not just a city of stone and irrigation, it is a city of learning, experience, and embodied wisdom, where survival skills are integrated into everyday life. You wander into a larger plaza, where the light reflects off carefully smoothed stone surfaces. You probably wouldn't realize how acoustics shape social interaction here. Sunken terraces and circular designs amplify sound, allowing announcements, songs, and storytelling to reach the entire crowd without effort. Even in an era without written laws or loud proclamations, communication flows naturally, sustaining social order and shared understanding. The design of space itself is a tool of governance and community cohesion.
Nearby, a musician plays a flute crafted from condor bone. You probably wouldn't think much of it at first, but the tones carry across the plaza, filling the air with rhythm that is both playful and sacred. Music in Caral is more than entertainment. It is a medium for connection, for celebration, and for ritual. The sound shapes perception, strengthens bonds, and marks the passage of time, tying individual lives to the larger pulse of the city. A few steps away, a small market has formed spontaneously, with vendors selling dried fish, cotton goods, and fruits. You probably wouldn't survive without understanding the subtle networks of trade here. Exchange is not haphazard. It is a sophisticated system that distributes resources efficiently while reinforcing social bonds. Caral thrives not through conquest, but through cooperation, mutual dependence, and the quiet rhythm of daily commerce. Exotic goods occasionally arrive from the coast or highlands, reminding you that even a city in the desert is connected to distant worlds. You notice the shadows beginning to stretch as the afternoon deepens. You probably wouldn't immediately sense how celestial patterns influence daily life,
but the city's alignment with the sun, stars, and seasonal cycles subtly guides agriculture, ritual, and navigation. Caral's planners were astronomers without telescopes, embedding cosmic knowledge into street grids, pyramid orientations, and water channels. Life here is synced to a rhythm older than written history, a careful dance with the universe itself.
In a quiet courtyard, a woman spins cotton while telling a story to nearby children. You probably wouldn't survive long if you ignored these oral traditions. They are the city's library, transmitting history, morality, and survival lessons from generation to generation. In a world without widespread writing, memory and storytelling are not just cultural expressions, they are lifelines, shaping values, preserving knowledge, and connecting lives across decades. You wander closer to the base of the Pyramid Mare, noting the gentle slope of each step and the broad, sunlit terraces. You probably wouldn't guess that every measurement here is intentional. The pyramids are resilient against earthquakes, floods, and time itself, a combination of engineering ingenuity and intimate knowledge of local geology. Workers used layers of stone, mud, and woven reed bags filled with rocks, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of balance, weight distribution, and durability. These structures endure not as monuments to war, but as enduring symbols of community, faith, and perseverance. Nearby, a group of priests performs a morning ritual. You probably wouldn't think much of it if you were distracted, but notice the choreography, the attention to sound, movement, and alignment. Ritual is integrated into daily life, connecting humans to the cycles of nature and the cosmos. In Caral, spiritual practice is inseparable from civic life, harmonizing purpose, rhythm, and social order.
You pass by homes where smoke curls from cooking fires, mingling with the scent of river reeds and dry earth. You probably wouldn't realize how every sensory input matters. Sight, sound, smell, and touch are all considered in city planning. Shade, airflow, and scent are manipulated to enhance comfort and health. Caral is designed to feel alive, nurturing both body and spirit, showing an understanding of human well-being that surprises modern visitors. Walking toward the riverbank, you see children learning to fish under the watchful eyes of elders. You probably wouldn't guess that these are both recreational and educational moments. Fishing teaches patience, observation, and ecosystem knowledge, skills crucial for survival. Every action here is layered with utility, meaning, and cultural continuity, highlighting a society where even leisure is purposeful. As the sun begins to tilt toward evening, you take in the view of the sprawling city. You probably wouldn't survive the desert without appreciating the subtle genius embedded in every canal, terrace, and pyramid. Caral's success is not built on brute force or military conquest, but on observation, ingenuity, cooperation, and a deep understanding of both human and natural systems. It is a living, breathing proof that civilizations can thrive in harmony, quietly, with the environment and with each other. You sit on the edge of a sunken plaza, letting the warmth of the stones seep into your skin. You probably wouldn't notice that even in stillness, the city hums with energy. Sound, movement, water flow, and ritual pulse together like a heartbeat. Caral is alive, not just in memory, but in the very arrangement of stone, water, and human activity. Every detail speaks of foresight, care, and collective ambition, a civilization built on patience, intelligence, and subtle artistry rather than war and domination.
Evening descends slowly over Caral, painting the sky in soft shades of coral and lavender.
You probably wouldn't survive here without noticing how the city interacts with light. Shadows stretch across plazas and terraces, revealing subtle details of architecture you might have missed during the day. The pyramids, sunken courts, and homes seem to shift, almost breathing with the fading sun, as if the entire city has a rhythm keyed to the movement of celestial bodies. There's a quiet poetry to it, a sense that Caral was designed not just to endure time, but to dance with it. You stroll along one of the main avenues, hearing the distant laughter of children still chasing each other through the streets. You probably wouldn't consider that these sounds are integral to social harmony here. Community life is reinforced in subtle ways: the rhythm of play, the cadence of conversation, the overlapping smells of food and earth. Caral thrives on these micro-interactions, moments so ordinary yet so vital, showing that the pulse of civilization is often found in the smallest, most human details. A soft breeze carries the scent of drying maize from nearby storage pits. You probably wouldn't survive long without realizing the importance of food security. Each kernel, each basket of preserved fish or fruit represents careful planning, an intimate understanding of seasons, and a network of trade that spans valleys and coasts. Even during times of drought, the city remains resilient, thanks to a system that values foresight and flexibility over immediate gratification.
Turning a corner, you come across a group of artisans shaping clay and carving intricate designs into stone. You probably wouldn't think twice about these activities at first, but look closer. The patterns, shapes, and figures convey identity, spirituality, and even social status. Every stroke and cut tells a story, a silent conversation that bridges generations. Some of these artisans work exclusively for ceremonial purposes, others for everyday utility, yet all contribute to the shared aesthetic that gives Caral its unique character. Historians still wonder how standardized or codified these artistic styles were, but their presence suggests a culture deeply invested in both functionality and beauty. The canal system hums quietly nearby, guiding water to fields and gardens. You probably wouldn't survive the arid climate without acknowledging the brilliance of Caral's engineers. They mastered techniques that allow for water conservation and flood management simultaneously. Overflow channels, reservoirs, and carefully sloped trenches ensure that even in dry seasons, life persists. Walking alongside the gentle current, you realize the city's design is a dialogue with nature, not an attempt to dominate it. Water here is both a practical necessity and a spiritual gift, celebrated in rituals, songs, and daily gratitude. As dusk deepens, you notice the first flares of ceremonial fires atop the pyramids. You probably wouldn't immediately sense the symbolic weight of these flames. They are beacons of connection, uniting the city in shared observation of the cosmos. Priests and leaders stand in solemn attention, chanting in patterns that mirror the movements of the sun, stars, and river. Ritual here is not separate from civic life. It is the framework that maintains social order, harmony, and a collective sense of purpose. Music arises in accompaniment, flutes and drums tuned to carry across plazas, turning ordinary space into a resonant, sacred theater.
Nearby, the market remains lively, vendors packing up goods but still exchanging stories. You probably wouldn't survive without recognizing the delicate balance between economy and community. Trade is both a practical necessity and a social glue, reinforcing alliances and spreading innovations, ideas, and exotic items from distant valleys and the Pacific coast.
Caral's economy is gentle yet robust, built on trust, shared benefit, and meticulous observation of supply and demand. Even the most mundane transaction carries layers of meaning and consequence. A small group of children gathers near a mural, pointing at images of past harvests, river rituals, and celestial events. You probably wouldn't think of this as formal education, yet the murals transmit knowledge, values, and history to the next generation. Each illustration is intentional, providing a reference point for storytelling, civic identity, and moral guidance. Caral teaches its young through visual cues, social interaction, and embedded cultural memory, a system as elegant as it is subtle.
The sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the pyramids. You probably wouldn't survive long if you underestimated the importance of astronomical alignment here. The largest pyramid is oriented to catch the first light of solstices, the smallest aligned with lunar cycles, all reflecting a culture deeply attuned to time, seasons, and celestial navigation. This precision is remarkable, especially considering the absence of metal tools, the wheel, or formal mathematical notation. Caral's people relied on observation, iteration, and collaboration, proving that ingenuity is often born from necessity and close attention to the world around you. Near the riverbank, a small group practices early forms of dance, their feet tracing patterns on sand and stone. You probably wouldn't think of this as essential, yet it reinforces social cohesion, rhythm, and cultural memory. These dances synchronize with music, solar and lunar cycles, and agricultural tasks, integrating aesthetic pleasure with practical knowledge. Every gesture, step, and movement strengthens a collective identity, reminding you that life in Caral is holistic. Physical, social, spiritual, and environmental aspects are inseparably intertwined.
As night falls, the first stars appear, reflected faintly in the river. You probably wouldn't survive without acknowledging the power of darkness and the rhythm it imposes. Night is a time for reflection, ritual, and rest, a deliberate pause in the pulse of the city. Torches flicker in courtyards, music softens, and the air cools just enough to allow the inhabitants to breathe and recover. Sleep here is as essential as any harvest. It is a sacred component of continuity and growth. Finally, you take a moment to sit on a low wall, observing the quiet interplay of firelight, stone, and flowing water. You probably wouldn't think of these as lessons, yet each sensation, each sight, each sound is a fragment of knowledge. How to live, thrive, and connect in a world that is at once harsh and generous. Caral is a masterclass in harmonizing with nature, with community, and with time itself, reminding you that civilization is not merely bricks and mortar, but relationships, understanding, and carefully nurtured culture.
The night deepens, carrying with it a cool breeze that rustles through Caral's plazas and homes. You probably wouldn't survive without noticing how the city feels alive, even when everyone sleeps. The pyramids stand like silent sentinels, their massive stone faces softened by moonlight, casting long shadows over sunken courts and narrow alleys. You walk carefully along one of the main streets, feeling the slight unevenness of stone underfoot, a subtle reminder that this city was built by human hands, layer by layer, generation by generation.
There's a quiet elegance in the way the structures interlock, in the way each plaza, staircase, and terrace seems designed to guide both movement and thought. From a distance, the soft thrum of a drum echoes across the riverbank. You probably wouldn't immediately understand the significance, but it is a call to connection. Music permeates the city even at night, not for entertainment alone, but as a tool of memory, ritual, and social cohesion. Flutes carved from condor bones, drums made of deer hide, and whistles fashioned from antlers all speak in a language that predates writing. Historians still wonder if these instruments were tuned to specific rituals, celestial events, or seasonal markers. Whatever the case, the sound carries far, binding the city together in invisible threads of rhythm and shared experience.
You pause near a small garden tucked beside a residential complex, inhaling the subtle aroma of herbs, maize, and river reeds. You probably wouldn't survive long if you ignored the ingenuity of Caral's agriculture. Irrigation channels run nearby, directing precious water to each plot, ensuring crops thrive even in a desert environment. Cotton, beans, squash, and guava grow in neat rows, each plant a testament to observation, patience, and innovation. Cotton, in particular, fuels trade far beyond the valley, spun into textiles and fishing nets that circulate across the coast. The city thrives not on conquest, but on care, knowledge, and careful management of resources. A group of young people gathers around an elder in one of the sunken plazas. You probably wouldn't think of this as a formal school, but knowledge here is transmitted through observation, storytelling, and direct participation. The elder gestures to carvings in the plaza walls, recounting tales of past harvests, celestial alignments, and legendary figures whose wisdom shaped the city. You realize that education in Caral is deeply experiential. Learning happens in the streets, the homes, and the fields. Every corner of the city is an opportunity to understand history, society, and nature in one intertwined lesson. Near the edge of the river, a fisherman adjusts his nets, preparing for the next morning. You probably wouldn't immediately notice the subtle interplay between technology and tradition. Nets are crafted from cotton, carefully knotted to withstand the currents and the weight of fish. Each knot and weave is a technique passed down through generations, refined through trial and observation. This combination of natural resources and meticulous skill shows how Caral's people harness their environment without subduing it, an elegance of design that extends from pyramids to plumbing to fishing gear.
You wander toward one of the ceremonial pyramids, watching the glow of a small fire atop its summit. You probably wouldn't survive without recognizing the layers of meaning in this scene. Rituals here are deeply integrated into civic life, tying governance, religion, and community together. Priests chant in intricate patterns, moving in synchronization with the rising and setting of stars. Music drifts down to the plazas below, carrying rhythms that have guided generations. There is a subtle power in these ceremonies, a gentle authority rooted in shared belief rather than force. As you explore further, you notice the careful placement of homes, workshops, and public spaces. You probably wouldn't think about urban planning while walking, but Caral's layout is deliberate. Residences for priests, administrators, artisans, and farmers are arranged in clusters that balance accessibility, privacy, and efficiency. Sunken plazas act as amphitheaters, projecting sound and focus to the center of ceremonies. Streets are oriented not only for movement, but for social interaction, guiding conversations, trade, and communal engagement. It is a city built on observation, foresight, and cooperation.
In the moonlight, the river sparkles with reflections of distant stars. You probably wouldn't immediately notice the way celestial observation permeates every aspect of life here. The largest pyramids are aligned with solstices. Smaller structures follow lunar cycles. Even residential clusters consider solar angles to maximize light and warmth. Caral's inhabitants blend practicality with spirituality, understanding the cosmos as both a tool and a guide. This knowledge is embedded in everyday life, teaching that survival and wonder are not separate, but interconnected. You pass a quiet courtyard where a few musicians experiment with new rhythms on flutes and small drums. You probably wouldn't think of this as experimentation, yet it is innovation at a personal and social scale. Music evolves here in dialogue with ritual, play, and daily life, shaping cultural memory. Each note, each beat, carries meaning beyond mere entertainment. Music functions as meditation, coordination, communication, and celebration, reinforcing bonds that architecture alone cannot sustain. A sudden gust of wind stirs the reeds along the river, carrying faint scents of distant trade goods. You probably wouldn't survive without noting Caral's extensive trade networks. Cotton, fish, fruits, and handmade crafts travel through the city, connecting it to coastal villages and inland communities. Exotic shells, rare stones, and tropical fruits arrive in return, enriching daily life and reinforcing alliances. Trade is a living artery, a circulation system that sustains both the economy and social cohesion.
Near the heart of the city, you notice inscriptions and carvings on plaza stones, subtle indicators of governance and social agreements. You probably wouldn't realize these details signify the careful organization that keeps Caral functional. Decisions, rituals, and social norms are encoded not just in written language, but in spatial orientation, communal memory, and repeated practice. The city teaches that order is not imposed by force, but maintained by participation, understanding, and shared commitment. Finally, as you sit on a low wall, listening to the river, the distant music, and the occasional crackle of ceremonial fires, you notice how every element of the city is interconnected. You probably wouldn't survive here without understanding that Caral's true strength lies not in walls, weapons, or conquest, but in integration. Integration of nature, community, knowledge, and spirit. Each stone, each canal, each musical note is part of a vast, living system that has endured through centuries, teaching lessons in resilience, harmony, and the quiet power of cooperation.
The sun rises slowly over Caral, casting a gentle golden light across the river and pyramids. You probably wouldn't survive if you tried to rush into understanding this place. It requires patience, observation, and a willingness to notice the small, elegant details hidden in plain sight. The morning air carries the subtle scent of wet earth, drying reeds, and freshly tended fields, and as you breathe it in, you realize that life here is a careful choreography of natural rhythms, human ingenuity, and quiet celebration. As you wander along the terraces of one of the smaller pyramids, you notice carvings etched into the stone. You probably wouldn't immediately see them as records, but these inscriptions may encode seasonal changes, astronomical observations, or social agreements. Historians still wonder if the arrangement of these markings functioned as a communal calendar or as symbolic reminders of spiritual belief. Either way, it's an indication that Caral's people had a sophisticated understanding of time, cycles, and how life on the riverbank was intertwined with the heavens. Near the base of the pyramid, a group of artisans works with clay, reeds, and stone.
You probably wouldn't expect to see such innovation casually integrated into daily life, but here it is. They mold vessels, fashion tools, and repair structures with a skill that seems almost effortless. Each motion is purposeful, passed down through generations, reflecting both tradition and adaptation. Some techniques are standard, others are experiments, small adjustments that improve strength, utility, or aesthetics. This is living knowledge, continually evolving, quietly improving the city from the ground up.
You step into a sunken plaza, and the acoustics immediately impress you. You probably wouldn't think about sound while walking, but this space was clearly designed to carry voices and music across hundreds of feet without amplification. Musicians practice on flutes carved from condor and pelican bones, their notes rising and falling in harmony with the natural acoustics. Drums made from stretched hides punctuate the rhythm. Music is woven into the very architecture, creating a multi-sensory experience that unites people in rhythm, emotion, and shared attention. By the riverbank, farmers tend to crops that feed the city. You probably wouldn't notice the subtle ingenuity in the irrigation channels unless you paused long enough to trace the water's path. Channels snake across the fields with gentle slopes, ensuring that every plant receives just enough water. This isn't mere plumbing, it's an early experiment in hydraulics, showing that Caral's inhabitants understood both the needs of the soil and the behavior of flowing water. Even in drought years, their planning ensures survival, a reminder that observation and intelligence are as powerful as brute strength.
You continue walking toward the central marketplace, where traders prepare goods for exchange. You probably wouldn't immediately grasp the scale of Caral's trade network. Cotton nets, dried fish, colorful shells, rare stones, and tropical fruits pass hands here, connecting communities that stretch from the river to the coast and highlands. The marketplace is a hub not just for commerce, but for information, social cohesion, and cultural exchange. Deals are made with words, gestures, and trust rather than fear or force, a testament to the city's emphasis on cooperation over conflict. In one corner, children play near a small water channel, their laughter mingling with the river's murmur. You probably wouldn't survive long here if you ignored the city's careful balance between work and play. Even in a civilization so focused on survival and infrastructure, human delight finds its place. Games, music, and communal storytelling ensure that knowledge, skill, and culture are transmitted joyfully. Play is practical too. It teaches agility, coordination, and social cooperation, preparing the next generation for responsibilities that are both mundane and extraordinary.
As the morning deepens, you notice the way sunlight reflects off the pyramids, highlighting irregularities in the stone. You probably wouldn't expect this aesthetic dimension, but it seems the builders intentionally left surfaces and angles that create shifting light patterns across the day. Some historians suggest this could have been symbolic, a visual connection between human effort and celestial cycles, while others think it may simply enhance visibility and navigation. Either way, it shows that beauty and utility are not mutually exclusive here. They coexist, intentionally or serendipitously. You approach a larger pyramid, where a small ceremony is about to begin. You probably wouldn't survive without feeling the weight of the rituals performed here. Priests in intricately woven garments chant softly, accompanied by flutes and the low hum of drums. Fires burn on terraces, sending smoke spiraling into the sky.
You sense that these rituals are not performed to instill fear or dominance, but to reaffirm connection between the people, the land, and the heavens. This is governance without coercion, authority without violence, a subtle power rooted in shared belief and understanding. Near the ceremonial plaza, you notice storage rooms filled with textiles, grains, and ceremonial objects. You probably wouldn't immediately see them as evidence of planning, foresight, and community. Every sack, every bundle represents careful record-keeping, foresight and production, and the capacity to weather lean seasons. It's a network of human effort and environmental intelligence, a safety net woven with hands, eyes, and experience over centuries. The city thrives because it values preparation, collaboration, and patience as much as innovation or ambition.
Walking past residential clusters, you notice that each home seems oriented with purpose. Windows and doorways align to maximize airflow and sunlight. You probably wouldn't survive without appreciating how Caral's architecture integrates comfort, health, and efficiency. Even without modern tools, the city achieves natural climate control, resilience against occasional storms, and harmony with the desert landscape. The city's design emphasizes that survival is as much about observation and adaptation as it is about labor or resourcefulness. Finally, you pause on a low terrace overlooking the city. You probably wouldn't think of a city as alive, but Caral hums with subtle energy. The river sparkles, flutes echo faintly from distant plazas, and the pyramids cast long, silent shadows. Every element, water, stone, vegetation, sound, is interconnected, part of a system that sustains life, culture, and memory. Caral demonstrates that a civilization need not wield armies to endure. Sometimes endurance arises from patience, observation, and careful cultivation of harmony. By mid-morning, the city is fully awake. Merchants shout softly, flutes trill in practice, fires burn atop the pyramids, and farmers tend their fields. You probably wouldn't survive here without noticing that Caral's strength comes not from conquest, but from community, curiosity, and quiet innovation. Each action, each movement, each sound reinforces a web of interdependence that has allowed this desert city to flourish for generations. And as you take it all in, you realize that in understanding Caral, you are learning more than history. You are glimpsing a philosophy of life itself.
The afternoon sun settles warmly on Caral, and you notice how the shadows stretch across the pyramids and plazas, creating patterns that seem almost intentional, like a slow, silent clock measuring the day. You probably wouldn't survive long here without understanding that light and shadow were more than aesthetic. They were woven into the city's design, guiding movement, rituals, and perhaps even marking time. Historians still wonder if these shadow patterns were used to track solstices, equinoxes, or other celestial events, or if the effect was mostly symbolic, a daily reminder of the connection between earth and sky. As you stroll past a broad staircase leading to the pyramid's summit, you feel the texture of the stone under your fingertips. You probably wouldn't expect to find such precision in work so many millennia old, yet the stones fit together like puzzle pieces, some weighing hundreds of pounds. Workers had no iron tools, no wheel, no draft animals, and yet, somehow, the pyramids rose with remarkable symmetry and strength. Every layer, every wedge, every corner reflects not brute force, but meticulous planning, patience, and a deep understanding of materials and environment. Down below, the sunken plazas bustle with activity. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring the way communal life here thrives through sound and movement. Traders call to one another, children's feet drum across stone, and the subtle rhythm of flutes and drums drift from nearby ceremonial spaces. These sounds carry through the plazas with perfect clarity, a natural amplification that transforms ordinary activity into a coordinated urban symphony. Music, commerce, conversation, everything seems designed to flow harmoniously, ensuring that Caral remains a vibrant hub rather than a chaotic jumble of isolated dwellings.
Near the marketplace, a farmer demonstrates how cotton nets are spun. You probably wouldn't immediately appreciate how integral these small routines are to the city's survival. Cotton is not just a commodity, it is a lifeline, used for fishing, trade, and textiles that bind Caral to distant communities. Some nets are dyed with natural pigments, each pattern representing a clan, a story, or a spiritual symbol. Historians still wonder if certain patterns conveyed specific messages, or if they were purely decorative. But either way, this practice shows a culture blending practicality, artistry, and social identity seamlessly. You wander along the riverbank, watching water channel through the irrigation system. You probably wouldn't survive without noticing the ingenious engineering here. Canals twist gently across the fields, guided by careful slope and gravity, ensuring each plot receives just enough moisture. Dams, spillways, and reservoirs demonstrate that Caral's people understood variability, planning for both drought and flood. The result is a quiet triumph. The desert blooms under attentive hands, showing that even harsh environments can be tamed through observation and careful design rather than domination. Children play near the water's edge, their laughter mingling with birdsong. You probably wouldn't recognize how play shapes society here. Games teach cooperation, dexterity, and social norms, embedding lessons that will serve the next generation. Even the youngest are immersed in the rhythms of Caral life, the cycle of planting and harvest, the cadence of ritual and celebration, the subtle balance between work and rest. Play is not trivial, it is foundational, quietly preparing the community to sustain itself for centuries.
As you climb a gently sloping mound, you notice small shrines etched into the stone. You probably wouldn't survive without sensing their spiritual significance. Each shrine reflects a reverence for the river, the earth, the stars, and the unseen forces guiding life. Ritual objects, often simple in appearance, carry layers of meaning. Historians still debate the exact nature of these ceremonies, whether they were purely spiritual, pragmatic, or a blend of both. But one thing is clear. The spiritual life of Caral was deeply integrated into daily existence, shaping decisions, architecture, and social norms. At the top of the pyramid, you pause to look across the city. You probably wouldn't survive long if you ignored how carefully everything is aligned. Houses, plazas, temples, and pyramids all follow a deliberate pattern, suggesting an awareness of astronomy, urban planning, and aesthetic cohesion. Streets channel movement efficiently, plazas provide gathering spaces for hundreds, and ceremonial platforms rise to catch the first light of dawn. Even in the apparent chaos of daily life, there is rhythm, order, and intention. Every stone, every path, every sound contributes to the city's vitality. You descend to a lower plaza, observing storage rooms filled with grains, dried fish, and textiles. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how carefully resources are managed. Caral's success depends on preparation, foresight, and community coordination. Surpluses allow for trade, rituals, and cultural development. The storage spaces are not hidden or secret. They are public, reinforcing transparency and trust.
A civilization this old, without reliance on fortifications or armies, demonstrates that stability can arise from cooperation, strategic planning, and shared values, rather than coercion or fear. Walking through residential clusters, you notice subtle differences in design. You probably wouldn't survive without observing that architecture reflects both status and function. Homes for administrators or priests are slightly larger, with terraces facing ceremonial plazas. Farmers' homes are practical, yet designed for airflow and sun protection. Every structure is built with the environment in mind, using stone, mud, and reeds to balance insulation, durability, and comfort. The city shows that social hierarchy need not disrupt communal harmony, and that utility and beauty can coexist in even the harshest climates. As the sun tilts westward, casting long shadows, you feel the city's pulse. You probably wouldn't recognize how life here thrives on subtle interconnectedness. Water channels nourish crops, artisans craft goods, children play, and rituals reinforce social cohesion. Caral's genius lies not just in individual achievements, but in the seamless integration of these elements, forming a society that is resilient, adaptive, and remarkably peaceful. In a world often defined by conquest, Caral stands as a quiet rebellion, a civilization flourishing without war, building monuments to harmony rather than domination.
By evening, fires atop the pyramids flicker against the deepening sky. You probably wouldn't survive long without sensing that ritual, trade, and daily life are all threads in a living tapestry. Each sound, smell, and movement contributes to a rhythm spanning generations. Music drifts across plazas, voices carry in the acoustics, and the river murmurs alongside human activity. Caral is not static, it is alive, a symphony of labor, art, faith, and connection, demonstrating that even in the harshest deserts, humanity can flourish when ingenuity meets cooperation. And as night settles, you realize that the city's strength is subtle but enduring. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring that Caral's legacy is not in conquest or weapons, but in observation, community, and careful stewardship of resources. Every stone, canal, flute, and ritual has been calibrated over centuries to create a city that thrives through balance, foresight, and respect for both nature and each other.
The desert stretches endlessly around you, soft sands glowing faintly in the dimming light. You breathe slowly, letting the warmth of the sun's memory linger on your skin, and the gentle whisper of the wind through Caral's stones hums like a lullaby just for you. Imagine the pyramids towering above, calm and silent, their edges softened by time, holding centuries of stories without a word, yet speaking to you through presence alone. The plazas, once bustling with music, laughter, and trade, now lie quiet, but you can almost hear the echoes, faint and comforting, like the softest drumbeat beneath your pillow. Imagine footsteps, far away but familiar, a rhythm that has traveled millennia, threading together lives, celebrations, and quiet moments alike. You are walking with them, feeling the smooth stones beneath your hands and the warm desert air on your face, each step slowing your heart, easing your mind. Let your thoughts drift like the river that once nourished Caral's fields, flowing freely, gently, without resistance. Imagine the music of flutes and soft drums blending with the wind, lulling you deeper into calmness, deeper into a place where time slows, where the desert itself seems to cradle you. Every detail you've seen, every canal, pyramid, and sunken plaza blends into a tapestry of peace, resilience,
and harmony, reminding you that life, even when long past, leaves a quiet wisdom behind. Now, with your body relaxed and your mind calm, feel the pulse of the desert slow, carrying you into gentle rest. Your eyelids grow heavy, your breathing steady, and the sounds of Caral's past fade into a soft, timeless hum. You are safe, you are still, and you are part of this endless, serene rhythm.
Walking toward the river's edge, you notice the water reflecting the moonlight, the channels glinting like silver veins across fertile fields. You probably wouldn't survive here without appreciating Caral's mastery of water management. Even in the night, irrigation channels hum with potential energy, patiently waiting to nourish crops at dawn. Spillways and small dams demonstrate a system designed for resilience, mitigating floods and droughts alike. The desert yields to attentive hands, and even without modern technology, the city thrives through intelligence, observation, and an intimate knowledge of its environment. Above, the sky spreads in a luminous tapestry of stars, almost more brilliant than you remember from home. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how Caral's inhabitants looked upward for guidance, interpreting celestial patterns to plan harvests, ceremonies, and construction. Alignments of pyramids and plazas suggest a profound understanding of solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles. Historians still debate exactly how precise these observations were, but the evidence is clear. The cosmos shaped life on Earth here, influencing architecture, agriculture, and spiritual practice. You can feel it in the careful orientation of steps, the placement of plazas, and the subtle angles of rooftops. The flutes and drums, now quieter, echo faintly across the city. You probably wouldn't expect that music, even in its softest form, is a medium for communication, teaching, and remembrance. Simple melodies carry encoded knowledge, celebrate the rhythm of seasons, and reinforce communal bonds. It's easy to imagine a city without written records, yet alive with stories told through sound. Even now, walking these ancient pathways, you sense the hum of forgotten songs that once accompanied planting, harvest, and worship.
You pause near one of the smaller pyramids, built with the same meticulous layering of stone, mud, and reed-filled baskets as the larger monuments. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how design here prioritizes both stability and subtle beauty. Rounded corners, layered fills, and broad foundations suggest intentional earthquake-resistant techniques. Even after millennia, the structures endure, a quiet triumph over nature's occasional fury. Historians still debate the precise methods used to transport stones without the wheel, but the elegance of these pyramids testifies to ingenuity, patience, and extraordinary coordination. Near a communal storage area, you see the organized arrangement of dried fish, grains, and woven cotton. You probably wouldn't survive without realizing how essential careful planning and resource management are to Caral's longevity. Surplus goods facilitate trade, sustain rituals, and create networks that extend beyond the city. Caral's economy thrives not through conquest, but through deliberate cooperation, a remarkable lesson in sustainability and foresight. Even in a desert, scarcity is mitigated not by hoarding, but by intelligent distribution and shared responsibility. A soft wind carries the smell of incense from ritual sites atop pyramids. You probably wouldn't expect that scent, familiar yet foreign, can instantly transform perception, connecting the ordinary to the sacred. Ritual life here is deeply integrated into daily existence, tying together agriculture, governance, trade, and social cohesion. Historians still wonder about the exact meanings of these ceremonies, but their cumulative effect is evident: a society held together by reverence, trust, and collective purpose rather than fear or force.
Children's laughter drifts faintly from residential areas, a gentle reminder that life continues uninterrupted. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how cultural transmission is woven into play, story, and song. The young learn observation, coordination, and cooperation intuitively, absorbing centuries of wisdom without a textbook or lecture. Even in the quiet of night, the city pulses with lessons, traditions, and a steady reassurance that community and connection outlast individual lives. As you wander past terraces and minor temples, you notice small carvings on stone walls. You probably wouldn't expect these simple etchings to be repositories of culture, memory, and possibly language. Symbols hint at trade agreements, spiritual beliefs, or seasonal cycles. Historians still debate their precise meaning, yet their presence confirms that communication extends beyond spoken words, integrating visual, auditory, and spatial knowledge into a holistic cultural system. At the edge of the city, near an irrigation reservoir, the reflection of moonlight shimmers across calm water. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how every natural resource is harmonized with urban design. Fields, water channels, homes, and ceremonial spaces coexist seamlessly, each element enhancing the other. Caral thrives not because it dominates the desert, but because it collaborates with it, understanding limitations and opportunities with subtle intelligence. Returning to the central plazas, you notice the broad layout, sunken spaces, and carefully arranged seating areas. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how communal gathering strengthens societal bonds. Even without armies or walls, Caral maintains stability through shared ritual, conversation, and observation. Fires flicker, stars glow above, and you feel the slow, unbroken heartbeat of a civilization that has endured centuries without succumbing to violence. Finally, you climb once more to a pyramid summit. Fires cast gentle shadows, revealing the intricate geometry of the city below. You probably wouldn't expect that this alignment of stone, water, and human activity reflects an understanding of the universe itself. Solstice sun, river flow, and sound propagation converge to create a living laboratory of observation, celebration, and survival. Historians still debate the exact intentions behind every architectural choice, but the evidence suggests sophistication beyond mere utility, a harmonious integration of human aspiration with cosmic rhythms. You stand there, letting the cool night air brush against your face, and realize that Caral, even in its silence, is alive. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring the lesson it imparts. Civilization can rise on cooperation, observation, and shared purpose rather than conquest and destruction. Every canal, flute, and stone carries echoes of those who lived, dreamed, and thrived here. And as the desert whim carries the faint scent of earth and incense, you feel a gentle connection to a city that has endured millennia, waiting for someone to notice, remember, and marvel.
The first light of dawn begins to touch the desert horizon, casting soft gold and pink streaks across Caral's ancient stones. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how dramatically color transforms the city, revealing textures and shapes that were invisible in night's shadow. Plazas glimmer, pyramids gleam, and even the smallest terraces are accentuated by morning's gentle warmth. Birds begin to stir, their calls mingling with the faint rustle of reeds and irrigation channels, a subtle orchestra marking the transition from night to day. Historians still debate the extent to which Caral's inhabitants timed their routines with the sun, but there is no doubt they lived in close dialogue with its movements, letting light guide their work, rituals, and leisure. As you wander past the central pyramid, you notice a soft patter of feet on the stone steps. Residents already beginning their day. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how daily life intertwines seamlessly with monumental architecture. Each staircase, terrace, and plaza is designed not only for beauty, but to facilitate flow, encourage communal engagement, and amplify sound so conversations, music, and instructions can reach far without shouting. It's an elegant choreography of human activity and stonework, demonstrating that urban planning in Caral was both practical and inspired, functional and artistic. Walking along the edges of the residential zones, you see artisans already at work. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how craft defines the culture here. Cotton is spun and woven, nets are repaired, clay pots are molded, and decorative stones are polished with meticulous care. Even simple objects are infused with intentionality, as if the act of creating is a ritual in itself. Historians still wonder how artistic expression balanced with daily survival. Yet the surviving artifacts suggest that creativity was not a luxury, but a necessity, a way to sustain identity, teach skills, and reinforce community bonds.
Near the river, water channels glisten in the morning sun. You probably wouldn't survive without noticing Caral's unparalleled engineering and irrigation. Channels divide, merge, and spiral gracefully, carrying life-giving water across fields with precision. Small spillways protect crops from floods, while subtle gradients allow gravity to nourish every terrace. Even in an era without pumps or modern tools, the people of Caral controlled water with careful observation, ingenious design, and unwavering diligence. The very landscape seems to bend in partnership with human ingenuity, creating a city that thrives in harmony with the desert, rather than fighting against it. You pause to observe a group of children by a field, their laughter rising above the gentle rush of water. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how education happens naturally here, through observation, participation, and storytelling. Games double as practice for future skills. Mimicry teaches social norms, and daily routines instill discipline and cooperation. Historians still wonder if there was formal instruction or if knowledge passed entirely through experience. But one thing is certain, the young are deeply integrated into the heartbeat of Caral, learning by doing, watching, and listening. Walking back toward the city's ceremonial center, you notice the sun climbing higher, illuminating carvings, patterns, and sunken plazas in ways you never imagined. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how these designs serve both spiritual and practical purposes. Plazas act as amphitheaters, gathering spaces, and instruments for sound. Staircases and pyramid angles interact with sunlight, casting shadows that may have been used to track celestial events. Even minor details, the alignment of stones, the layout of channels, the spacing of terraces, suggest a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and urban planning.
Approaching the largest pyramid, you notice faint traces of ancient fires on the summit. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how rituals shaped the city's rhythm, from firelit ceremonies to musical offerings and communal gatherings. Every act reinforces social cohesion and spiritual connection. Music drifts through plazas, flutes and drums carrying patterns that echo across time, subtly guiding movement and attention. Historians still debate the specific meaning of these rituals, but the evidence is undeniable. Spiritual life is inseparable from urban design, trade, and daily routines. Caral's citizens built not only for survival, but for harmony, celebration, and shared purpose. Looking across the city from the summit, you notice the careful arrangement of homes, administrative areas, and smaller pyramids. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how every structure contributes to the city's resilience.
Earthquake-resistant foundations, rounded corners, layered construction, and thoughtfully placed channels demonstrate a deep understanding of natural forces. Survival here is less about conquest and more about anticipation, observation, and respect for the environment. The city doesn't dominate the land, it cooperates with it, creating a balance that supports centuries of human habitation. Returning to a sunken plaza, you notice the faint traces of ceremonial patterns in the stone, perhaps marking seasonal events or communal decisions. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how space itself communicates, teaching, guiding, and organizing collective behavior. Every curve, depth, and alignment has a purpose, often multiple purposes: practical, ceremonial, and symbolic. Historians still debate the exact meanings of carvings and layouts, yet the precision and care are undeniable, leaving a silent testimony to intelligence, planning, and culture.
At a market area near the central pyramid, you see the flow of goods: woven nets, dried fish, cotton bundles, polished stones, and colorful shells. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how trade weaves the city into a broader network of connection. Caral thrives not as an isolated fortress, but as a hub of exchange, drawing wealth, ideas, and diversity from far-off regions. Economic vitality sustains ceremonial life, artistry, and education, reinforcing a cycle of interdependence and shared prosperity that keeps society resilient in a challenging environment. As you move through quieter neighborhoods, you notice small shrines, perhaps family spaces for devotion, or miniature ceremonial platforms. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring the intimate interplay of private and public life here. Rituals occur in grand plazas and pyramids, but they also echo in homes, gardens, and pathways, weaving spirituality seamlessly into everyday routines. Music, food, storytelling, and craftsmanship are all imbued with meaning, connecting the mundane to the sacred and individuals to the collective. Looking back toward the river, you notice water glinting against stones, reeds swaying gently, and early workers tending crops. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring how Caral's survival relies on collaboration, observation, and care. Every action, from planting to trading, contributes to a delicate balance with nature and neighbors alike. The city's success is rooted in foresight, patience, and shared responsibility rather than force, a reminder that human ingenuity thrives best in partnership with the world.
Finally, you climb one last gentle slope toward the city's outer terraces. Fires have dimmed, birds have taken wing, and the desert wind carries the faint scent of earth and incense. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring the lesson Caral imparts. Civilization can flourish through observation, creativity, and connection. Every stone, canal, and flute is a testament to human resilience, intelligence, and care. Even after millennia of silence, the city's rhythm persists, subtle yet profound, inviting you to pause, reflect, and imagine life as it once unfolded under the vast Peruvian sky. As you stand there, absorbing the scene, a quiet sense of awe settles over you. You probably wouldn't survive ignoring the enduring beauty and wisdom of a civilization that thrived without conquest, domination, or violence. Caral's story, buried for centuries beneath shifting sands, reminds us that human potential is vast, fragile, and deeply interwoven with the environment, society, and imagination. Here, in this desert valley, you feel the pulse of lives long gone,
yet still echoing through stone, water, and music.
The desert stretches endlessly around you, soft sands glowing faintly in the dimming light. You breathe slowly, letting the warmth of the sun's memory linger on your skin, and the gentle whisper of the wind through Caral's stones hums like a lullaby just for you. Imagine the pyramids towering above, calm and silent, their edges softened by time, holding centuries of stories without a word, yet speaking to you through presence alone. The plazas, once bustling with music, laughter, and trade, now lie quiet, but you can almost hear the echoes, faint and comforting, like the softest drumbeat beneath your pillow. Imagine footsteps, far away but familiar, a rhythm that has traveled millennia, threading together lives, celebrations, and quiet moments alike. You are walking with them, feeling the smooth stones beneath your hands and the warm desert air on your face, each step slowing your heart, easing your mind. Let your thoughts drift like the river that once nourished Caral's fields, flowing freely, gently, without resistance. Imagine the music of flutes and soft drums blending with the wind, lulling you deeper into calmness, deeper into a place where time slows, where the desert itself seems to cradle you. Every detail you've seen, every canal, pyramid, and sunken plaza blends into a tapestry of peace, resilience, and harmony, reminding you that life, even when long past, leaves a quiet wisdom behind. Now, with your body relaxed and your mind calm, feel the pulse of the desert slow, carrying you into gentle rest. Your eyelids grow heavy, your breathing steady, and the sounds of Caral's past fade into a soft, timeless hum. You are safe, you are still, and you are part of this endless, serene rhythm.